Want him back? Ja, weiß ich nicht. Wir gehen rein ins Video. Top 10 Strongest Abilities of all time. Ich würde sagen, Valga-Ult, Valga-Cage. Unglaublich mächtig. Syndra-Ult. Ari-Ult. Was noch richtig mächtiger Spell-Chat? Fällt euch ein richtiger Spell ein? Ey, Lego, Lele, vielen Dank für die 10, Mann. Danke dir für die 10er-Bombe. Kane E. Unglaublich mächtig, auf jeden Fall. Trünne mehr W und Ult. Trünne mehr W und Q. Ich glaube, die Ult ist gar nicht so geil. Sie geht halt ein bisschen Fury und das war's. Aber Q gibt dir halt einfach sehr viel Heilung. Absurd viel AD. W nimmt absurd viel AD weg. Und das Krasse an Q und W ist halt, beides einfach nur Klick. Nicht mal die Maus am vorhin, einfach nur Klick. Nicht mal Point-Klick, einfach nur Klick. Schon sehr OP. Yumi W. Okay, Yumi W ist safe, auch ziemlich OP. Alte Twisted Fate Ult. Alte Twisted Fate E. Wenn du das meinst. Auf der E war damals eine Ult drauf. Das ist safe auch sehr OP gewesen. Lego Lele nochmal. Vielen Dank für deine 10, aber ich muss schon Schluck Wasser auf dich trinken. Lieber an all dieser erwischt hat. Danke dir, mein Dude. There we go. Nasus wäre auch Point-Click mit dem Slow und so auf einem anderen Champion wäre safe auch sehr, sehr OP. Wisst ihr, was auch noch richtig broken Spell ist? Gragas E. Weil er überschreibt jeden anderen Movement-Spell. Er gewinnt quasi das 1v1 gegen alle anderen Fähigkeiten, die ähnlich wären. Das heißt, Lee Sin, Q, Poppy oder ähnliches. Sehr, sehr mächtig. Also in die Richtung zu gehen, glaube ich, auch smart. Ey, danke für den Raid, Bro. Vielen Dank, Mann. Oh, ich war ein geiler Stream am Start und willkommen. Wir reden gerade über broken Fähigkeiten in League of Legends. Akshan W, also der Revive, auch der ist absurd broken. Früher wäre Akshan W ein gesamtes Kit gewesen. Mana-Regeneration, unsichtbar werden, Leute wiederbeleben können, Bounty oben drauf bekommen, sehr, sehr unbalanced, 100%. Fiora Passive, ja, also uns fallen eine Menge gute Fähigkeiten ein. Gibt Leute, die sagen, starke Fähigkeiten als bei den Schwachen, da hatten wir weniger Ideen. Rein da.
For anyone who's been following my channel for 2 minutes or more, you'll know I make a lot of videos on abilities. Badly designed abilities, well-designed abilities, removed abilities, types of abilities, the whole 9 yards. Which is why I'm surprised I haven't made a video on this topic yet. Better late than never though. Today I'll be making a video on the top 10 most powerful abilities in League of Legends. In a game with no shortage of complaints on frustrating champions and overloaded kits, it can be difficult to curate almost 500 abilities into just 10, so some explanation on my grading criteria is in order. As you know, abilities are tailor-made to the champion specifications, the kind of playstyle they have and what the ability in question is synergizing with. This allows a few of them who objectively would be absolute war crimes to exist in the game because within the context of their owner's moveset, it's more tolerable than in a vacuum. Circumstances can cause an ability to fluctuate in value. For instance, Darius' passive is phenomenal, no one would say otherwise, but how valuable is it on a champion who builds AP? Is it really that good on a burst-oriented champion who likely one-shots their target before even reaching 5 stacks? So on and so forth. The 10 I chose are meant to be applicable to as many champions as possible, regardless of class, scaling, etc. Also, it won't consider the ability slot or internal interactions, just the ability itself, kind of like an ultimate spellbook. Finally, the list is not ordered, meaning it's not 10 to first place, it's just 10 overall. Without further ado, let's get started.
Ja, dann Valga E. Valga E, vor allem die alte Valga E, die instant war, einer der most broken Spells of all time. Wenn nicht der most broken Spell of all time. Ich glaube, Valga E, die alte, ist actually der beste Spell, den wir jemals hatten. Vor allem für eine Non-Ultimate. Ich glaube, bei Ultimates kann man halt über vieles reden, so, ne? Aber die alte Valga E als Basic Spell, Bruder, der Shape war so fucking broken. Aber die aktuelle ist ja auch stark. Wie lange dir der Feind? Vielen Dank für den Zapmann. Willkommen. Danke dir.
First ability, and this should be no surprise, is Trendemir's Undying Rage. Unless your name is Sion, there's legitimately no champion who doesn't want this ability. Yes, even Karthus would want this. 5 seconds of death immunity that can be activated even while crowd controlled. The bonus Fury gain is lost on anyone besides Renekton, Rek'Sai, or anyone with a similar Fury mechanic, but that's a moot point as this ability circumvents the single universal form of counterplay for any champion, killing them. Additionally, while I'm not going to consider mana cost on champions who don't use it, the fact that this ultimate has no cost makes it all the more valuable. The only thing balancing on
Der Spell ist halt wirklich ein sehr guter, aber ich finde, wenn man Trunamir reworkt, sollte der Spell auf jeden Fall da bleiben und Q und W müssen genervt werden, weil Q und W macht Trunamir so OP. Die Ult ist halt das, was ihn auszeichnet. Ist zwar disgusting strong, aber auch fein. Gibt viele Champions, die eine disgusting strong Ult haben, aber ist trotzdem fein. Trunamir Q und W brauchen dringend Änderung.
Rage is that it's on a champion whose only method of dealing damage is close range auto attacks. Imagine giving this to a ranged attacker or an assassin who can blitz you down in a fraction of a second. This might be in contention for the best ability in the entire game period. Number 2 will be Nasus' Wither. This might be a head scratcher as some may consider other abilities far more impactful, so allow me to explain my reasoning. Debuffs tend to be inversely proportional to their effects. Typically, the more severe the effect of the debuff is, the shorter it lasts. For example, stuns are typically 1 second, but roots are 2 seconds. This doesn't apply to Wither. On top of having a 95% slow and a 71% cripple, it lasts a whopping 5 seconds, the longest duration on any debuff I believe. It's point and click with the cast.
Death Ram ist 7 Sekunden. Ich sag's nur.
Range of 700, letting him easily tag even the likes of Jinx, Twitch, Trist, and Caitlyn. I consider Nasus W one of the 10 strongest abilities on account of it being so effective that on many occasions it's just as if not more powerful than hard crowd control. A common defense against Wither is that anyone with a dash can circumvent the slope, but unless you have a global teleport, few dashes, if any,
so
can get
geil.
you far enough away from Nasus to where he can't
Das ist schon
have
geil,
a
wie das
global
aussieht. Auch wenn man Teil das Gesicht sieht, wer immer trauriger
teleport.
wird.
Few
Weil saurer
dashes,
wird.
if any, can get you far enough away from Nasus to where he can't simply just chase after you. At a cap of 95%, it's almost the same as being rooted, and with the cripple of 71%, anyone who relies on auto attacks may as well be stunned. Moreover, Wither is kept in check by Nasus being an immobile juggernaut. Imagine giving Wither to a fast champion who can gap close on you. You're basically screwed. Though Season 14 reduced the accessibility of ability haste, with sufficient cooldown reduction, you can refresh Wither shortly after it expires, perma-slowing anyone you used it against. It's funny how one of, if not the strongest debuff in the game, isn't even hard crowd control. Number 3 will be Zed's living.
Denkst du auch, der Spell ist auch dadurch ein bisschen gebalanced, dass du halt die anderen Spells maxen musst? Weil E und Q sind eigentlich viel besser. Also vor allem Q, aber E auch wegen des Armor Shreds. Aber natürlich im richtigen Game 5 Punkte W. Ich meine, wir haben letztes Jahr gesehen, Leute wie Hands und auch Barrel haben Nasus Support gespielt gegen Kalista, weil dieser Point-Click gegen hypermobile Champions halt so stark ist und auch zeitgleich halt
Schade, der Lose
einfach
gestern.
gut ist. Ne?
Aber in
Gegen
NRW Reis again.
diese jumpende kleine Frau. Ja, gestern verloren, Content Run Baby. Momentum aus dem Lawbreaker mitnehmen. 5 Games waren Banger. Wir haben das noch. Darin ist der Pose für den Resub, Bro. Danke, Mann.
Shadow, another candidate for the single best ability in the game. Living Shadow wears a ton of hats, each one as valuable as the next. For starters, it's a free target blink that travels so far.
Also warte. Welche Variation haben wir denn gerade von Living Shadow? Ich weiß gar nicht mehr, in welchem Universum wir leben von Living Shadows, weil wir hatten ja mal die eine Living Shadow Variation, der hat einfach flat 25 AD gegeben, wenn du einen Punkt reingemacht hast. Danach, wenn du die richtigen Ziele gekillt hast, hast du irgendwie Bonus prozentual AD bekommen. Und dann konnte irgendwie Zed Leute hochstacken. Ja, ist das Remove? Was ist das überhaupt für Living Shadow? Also ihm geht es quasi nur noch um seinen Jump. Um mehr geht es ihm gar nicht, ja? Also nur um den Blink. Weil der Blink ist mega geil. Aber, oder würde jetzt auch argumentieren, wenn jetzt Syndra die Pässe fette, dann könnte sie es auch stacken oder wie? Oder was oder wer?
Distance, and you can decide when you want to swap places or not at all. Then it mimics the same abilities cast by the user. The extent of Living Shadow's pressure is restrained by Zed only having Razor Shuriken and Shadow Slash, mild attacks in the grand scheme of things. But if this was attached to another champion, it can give them so many things. With Living Shadow, everyone has mobility. With Living Shadow, everyone has poke. With Living Shadow, everyone has a neutral game. With Living Shadow, everyone has double the DPS effectively, assuming they have applicable abilities. This attack would be ridiculous on poke mages like Xerath, who now has an escape option and semi-global attack range on his Q and W.
Ja, fair, ja.
I know what you're
Kann man
thinking. The
argumentieren, ja.
Shadow doesn't echo auto attacks and point-and-click abilities, so AD carries may not want it. Not true. If they have a skill shot or casting ability, that still works. Vayne can toss out a shadow and blink to it for a better condemn angle. Caitlyn can send out her shadow to extend her trap cast range, and don't forget, it is still a blink. Garen mains would sell their soul to have Living Shadow. Imagine Ahri with Living Shadow. She throws out 2 orbs, 2 charms, 2 rounds of Foxfire. Imagine Rumble with Living Shadow. He has 2 flamethrowers, 2 electro harpoons. The list goes on and on. Zed's W could effectively take away all the weaknesses of some champions. Speaking of double casting, number 4 is Seraphim's passive. Stage presence is better than Living Shadow in some cases and worse than others. Virtually every champion would love the ability to double cast one of their skills, especially those with the stacking effect. For example, Yasuo, Yana, Vladimir, Cassante, double casting Q instantly primes their third one. Syndra double casting Q for 2 spheres, Rengar double casting Q for even more burst damage, Vel'Koz double casting any of his abilities for faster deconstruction. Granted, this can be counterproductive for abilities that come with a recast, like
Wäre
LeBlanc.
so cool. Wir hatten ja Ultimate Spellbook, ne, wo alle andere Ults bekommen. Auch bei Arena hatten wir es ja. Da haben wir so einen Game-Modus, so Earth-mäßig, One-for-All-mäßig, wo alle einfach sowas, so einen Effekt halt, alle kriegen Living Shadow, alle kriegen Double Attacks, irgendwie. Wäre schon, glaube ich, ziemlich lustiger Fun-Modus.
Distortion, Phoenix Precision Protocol, or Pantheon Siege's Assault, but again, this is a theory crafting video, not a practical one. Regardless, you get the idea. Another benefit that accompanies stage presence is the empowered auto attack you get. By casting abilities, you gain bonus attack range and magic damage on your next auto attack. So, if you were to imagine giving this to a melee champion, they can start poking you in lane. It really boils down to which one you value more. Some champions want the mobility and extended range of Living Shadow, while others want to be able to double cast point and click spells, which you can't do with Living Shadow. I think more people would take ZW, but you really can't go wrong with either. Number 5 is Yasuo's Wind Wall. You knew it was going to be here. Despite being a situational ability in that it can only block projectiles, countless critical abilities in this game are projectiles, and around half of all champions in this game are ranged. You'd be hard pressed to find a game where Wind Wall isn't effective. For many champions, Yasuo's W invalidates their entire kit, and it's also very forgiving.
Also als der Spell rausgekommen ist, Reddit ist so mental gegangen. Die Leute hatten einen kompletten Breakdown, als dieses Video live gegangen ist, von Freak moderiert oder was es damals war. Junge.
Wind Wall destroys any projectile that so much as touches it, no matter where it came from. Even if you put the wind wall in front of you, it can still block projectiles behind it and besides it.
Und wenn heute Wind Wall rausgekommen wäre, würde kein Haar danach krähen, oder?
In letzter Zeit so sehr. Mach weiter, so toll in live.
Ey, liebe Bro, Meliton. Geil, das freut mich aufrichtig, mein Dude. Wenn heute Wind Wall rauskommen würde, würde kein Haar danach krähen. Weil wir anderen Shit gewohnt sind. Akalis unsichtbare Wolke, selbst gegenüber Turrets. Samiras 360 Wind Wall. Ja, und wir sind einfach keine Ahnung, resettende Ults von Swain, Olaf, Ceri mit eben Milliarden Movement Speed, I don't know. Aber ja, es ist glaube ich, okay. Cassandra kann alles. Ja, Cassandra, der komplett broken ist. Top Kench mit 5000 Leben, 500 AP. Nice. Der eine richtige Stand für den Sub, liebe Bro. Danke, Mann.
For 4 seconds, at higher ranks, its width can block off an entire choke point.
Heute würde Windwall noch einen Dash haben. Ja, true. Gib aber Riot Games bitte keine neuen Ideen. Bitte nicht.
Giving it duration and coverage. Obviously, Windwall loses all effectiveness against exclusively melee champions, so if you're fighting a Renekton or Trundle, this will be of no help to you. But unless the entire enemy team consists of only melee champions and no projectiles, you can and will find a use for Windwall. This ability is the single biggest reason why Yasuo is so frustrating to fight for a lot of champions. His dashes, double crit chance, shield from walking, none of those would be anywhere near as annoying if not for Windwall. It's no surprise that when you ask anyone about overpowered abilities, this often shows up. I can't think of any other ability that can potentially
Haben wir gerade eben, als ich euch gefragt habe, hat irgendwer Windwall gesagt gerade eben? Ja, ich glaube nicht. Ne, ich scroll mal hoch. Das war genau, als Lego Lele die 10er-Bombe reingesappt habt. Kane E, Trunner mehr WE, Jin Passive, Camille Passive, Aurelian A, Kale Ult, also Twisted Fate, Yumi, Yorick, Echo Passive, Urusat Ult, Smolder Q. Kein einziger hat Windwall geschrieben in meinem Stream. Niemand. Wir sind alle keine Yone-Hater. Liegt wahrscheinlich auch daran, dass wir, Yasuo, das liegt wahrscheinlich daran, dass wir Toplaner sind, die viele von uns, oder? Weil Toplane ist halt Yasuo einfach kacke. Da gibt es keine Projektile zum Blocken. Viel Spaß gegen meinen Jax, Renekton, Aatrox, irgendwas zu blocken. Selbst gegen Aatrox wie mir egal. Interesting. Und der Hass geht bei Toplaner immer auf Yone. Ja, fühle ich. Also ich habe auch einen viel größeren Hass auf Yone weh, weil der Spell ist nämlich fucking disgusting. Macht sowohl Magic als auch physische Schaden, geht durch Minions durch, gibt die riesige Shit, keinen Cooldown-Scale mit der Attack-Speed. Der Wind-Up-Scale auch mit der Attack-Speed, der Spell ist actually unbalanced. Windwall ist auch stark, aber ich finde Windwall nicht mal mehr so schlimm. Weil du brauchst es halt auch auf Yasuo, um den Champion spielen zu können, das ist das Problem gerade in modernen League of Legends, in Pro-Play. Wir haben nie Assassinen im Mittel, die viable sind, weil sie schlichtweg nicht teamfighten können und weil sie auch nicht lanen können. Und Yones Windwall ist halt so ein Assassinen-Spell, den in Teamfights viable machen kann, was actually keiner cool ist. Durch ist ein Problem mit Solo-Queue, gerade mit Lower Elos ist Yasuo ja ein sehr frustrierender Champion. Sowohl in die positive als auch negative Richtung, in 0-10 und im Gegnerteam 10-0. Aber ja, interesting. Ich hasse einfach beide. Ja, verstehe ich auch. Jo, danke dir, das Landhuhn, Mann. Danke dir, Bro.
An entire champion. Jax's Counter-Strike is annoying for auto-attackers, but if they have damaging abilities, they can use those. Fiora's Riposte is a big middle finger.
Ja, aber Jax E macht auch gegen Damaging Abilities, außer wenn sie Point-Click sind, Damage Reduction oben drauf. Das wissen wir alle nicht, aber du musst trotzdem auf weniger Damage, wenn du Jax E drückst. Außer es ist Point-Click Elise Q oder so. Oder Vladimir Q. Aber alle AOE-Spells werden auch reduziert. Also der Spell ist auch sehr gut. Klar nicht ganz so wie Windwall, aber ja.
Against predictable crowd control or key attacks, but you can usually play around it. It's almost impossible for a projectile attacker to stop Windwall aside from wait for it to dissipate. But in the 4 seconds it takes for that to happen, they're probably dead. Hard to believe this guy.
Ja, das ist schon frustrierend, wenn du halt AFK gehen musst für 4 Sekunden. Du bist so eine Long-Range Jinx, du willst sitten und bist aber im Team weiter komplett AFK, du kannst nichts machen.
Came out 10 years ago. Number 6 is Yumi's You and Me. Though she's no longer as big of a virus to the game as she used to be following her gameplay update, Yumi is still a very detested champion for many just by her sheer concept. In her defense though, if her companion dies and she has no one to reattach to, she's completely at the mercy of the enemy team, given the absence of any meaningful combat pressure in their kit. Now, imagine giving this to someone who does have combat pressure. Forget what I said about Tryndamere and Zed. You and Me is easily the strongest ability in the game. Think about it. A mage attaching themselves to a super tank like Sion, Ornn, Zac, or Sejuani. Lulu quite literally being joined at the hip to Kog'Maw, making it impossible for you to hit her.
Das gab's ja in Arena, ne? Bloß, Chat, wisst ihr noch, ob bei der Arena dieses Argument dich unanklickbar gemacht hat oder ob du dich nur rangeheftet hast? Weil das war absurd OP auf vielen Kombinationen. Und er hat recht. Also ja. Ich muss sagen, mir gefällt das Konzept dieses Videos nicht so sehr wie das hiervon. Weil darüber nachzudenken, was auf anderen Champions Sache wäre, bla bla, ist halt in sich selbst recht useless. Mir ging es jetzt mehr so um den Impact von einem, also ja, weiß nicht. Aber Konzept des anderen Videos hat mir ein bisschen besser gefallen, persönlich.
Imagine if you were tagging onto a Malphite as he ults in, then detaching yourself and going to town on the now CC'd backline. Yumi's W would unleash Armageddon on the balance of League of Legends if it was extracted out of her kit, underscoring just how offensive it is to have in the game. I'm aware you can't use basic attacks while tagged onto someone, so it's not like Vayne can hide behind a 10,000 HP Mundo in Free Fire, but in a similar fashion to the Zed Shadow argument, in no way does it make it any less appealing to have on those champs. Vayne can auto-attack a bunch, then hide behind her tank support and wait until it's safe to come back out again. It's like a reverse Tahm Kench Devour. For anyone else, it's fair game. Ace lanes can hide behind their tank and just Q spam while the tank moves around for them. And there's no way you can stop the channel because he's untargetable. I cannot even begin to fathom the extent of applications Yumi's W has. Like, who doesn't want this? I'm legitimately trying to think of a single champion who doesn't want the ability to hide behind someone else. You might say tanks, considering they're the ones you want to hide behind, but even tanks will love Yumi W. If a Malphite hides behind a Vayne, no one would have the balls to engage on her. As soon as they do, he detaches and ults them just like that. Or you can have Maokai attached to a knock.
Nee, Bro, du kannst ja, Vayne kann einfach Malphite kann hinter Vayne rumlaufen, hä? Das geht ja auch ohne Yumi weh.
As he goes in, and then you have both of them in the middle of the enemy team. There's unironically limitless ways to abuse this ability if it were usable outside of the context of Yumi's kit. Number 7 will be Malphite's ultimate. Hear me out. Compared to the aforementioned game warping, nay, game shattering abilities, Malphite's ultimate may seem underwhelming, but its simplicity is what makes it so valuable in my opinion. Crowd control is the X factor of League. Vhagar can have 1 billion AP or Smolder can have 1,000 stacks, but if they get CC'd, they may as well have nothing. No other ability embodies the spirit of crowd control and hard engage more than Malphite's unstoppable force. It's a long-range, free-target CC immune dash accompanied by a respectable amount of base damage and a 1.5 second knockup, meaning tenacity is worthless against it. Even those who don't build ability power can make great use of Malphite's ultimate. Assassins, easy gap closer and lockdown. Fighters, easy engage. Duelists, you're impossible to 1v1. ADCs, name a better get-off-me tool than this. Mages, well, they're building AP so they can one-shot you with it. Tanks, hooray, more CC. Worst case scenario, it's also good for escaping as it travels a far distance, so you can use it for a wide...
Ist Skill der Eisenheber basically, dass du ins Gym gehst? Habe ich den Namen erst jetzt verstanden? Da hebt man das Eisen, oder wie? Du bist einer der Gym-Bros. Ist quasi... Sorry.
Variety of things. It's just a complete package. Most other engage abilities have a weakness or require some kind of follow-up to them. Alistar's headbutt necessitates pulverize. Zack's elastic slingshot takes time to channel and is a lot slower. Sejuani's arctic assault can only knock out one person, but Malphite's ultimate does everything. I would gladly give up both summoner spells to have Malphite ult as a summoner, and I'm sure many of you would as well, no matter who you're playing. For crying out loud, you can be 0-10, but you get one good ultimate and win the fight for your team.
True.
Malphite's just him. Number 8 is Akshan's Dirty Fighting. Ironically, this might be the most controversial pick of the list, despite how crazy of an ability this is. I chose this not for the amount of champions that would make use of it, but for how destructive it would be on those who do. On-hit effects are such a prevalent aspect of League's gameplay compared to back in the day where there weren't that many. Even without that...
War das gerade der Kopfmann, der steht? Nee, das war Twisted Fate, oh. Genau, dieser Kopfmann, der einfach stehen bleiben konnte mit so 5, irgendwas Attack spielen, also es hat sich gar nicht gelohnt zu spacen. Und dann gab es Scripter mit diesem Kopfmann Attack Speed und es sah so illegal aus, wie sie sich bewegt haben. Also perfekt gescriptet. Perfekt DPS, perfekt sich bewegt. Das war unmöglich menschlich zu machen. Ist, glaube ich, unmöglich menschlich zu machen.
Effects are such a prevalent aspect of League's gameplay compared to back in the day where there weren't that many. Even without that, Akshan's passive is fantastic for anyone who remotely likes to auto-attack. You get 2 shots for free, a bit of extra damage from the 3-hit passive, you can cancel the second auto to get a quick speed boost and kite or chase enemies with it, and you get a passive shield every so often. I cannot think of a single AD carry who wouldn't want this passive, even Ezreal can use it. And there are tons of melee champions who want this too, assuming they have it along with their own passive, mind you. Dirty Fighting is bounced on Akshan considering his Q is a pretty mild ability, his W isn't even a combat spell, and his ultimate's not the best. But imagine giving this to Senna for instance. One auto attack deals damage and takes the soul. Vayne with Dirty Fighting needs to only attack once to get a 3-hit passive and 10 with Rage Quit. Shen could use Dirty Fighting to get 2 quick hits of his Q. Same with Cho'Gazi. It's not as crazy as other abilities on this list, but I think it deserves to be here purely for how disgusting it would be on champs with a modicum of auto attack pressure, which is still a lot of them. Number 9 is Kael's Divine Judgment. I'm torn on whether Kael's ultimate is better than Trinalt or vice versa. On one hand, you can burst down Kael before she has a chance to use it, but on the other, she can use this to rescue herself or her teammate, and following the chain...
Aber die Ult ist schon einfach deswegen kacke, weil du jetzt nicht im CC casten kannst. Das Trinalt mit seiner Ult im CC casten kannst, ist schon sehr OP. Weil es nimmt halt so viel Counterplay weg von dem Champion. Klar, Der Fakt, K-Load macht Damage, K-Load kann man Teams übertragen, ist mega geil. Also safe auch eigene Argumente, aber drin mehr im CC ist schon mächtig.
Just say to it last year, you get 2 seconds to attack at basically no penalty. A 2.5 second total invincibility is incredibly versatile. Not to mention, it comes with a huge AoE attack at the end of it. Kale Salt.
Und das soll man vielleicht auch mal vorheben, aber du kannst gegen Trünner mehr lifestealen. Gegen Kale kannst du nicht lifestealen. Weil Trünner mehr kann er mehr Leben haben, er kann bloß nicht reduziert werden, aber er nimmt quasi noch Schaden, während Kale einfach kein Damage nimmt. Deswegen gehen ganz viele Heilungsfähigkeiten oder Lifesteal-Fähigkeiten, Effekte gehen nicht gegen Kale, was echt lästig ist. Das ist genau das gleiche mit Pantheon E oder Tarek Ult. Während du halt gegen Kindred und Trünner mehr halt noch lifestealen kannst. Right?
Ultimate is often overlooked on the basis of her being almost irrelevant for the first 20 minutes of the game. Outside of that though, take everything I said about Tryndamere Ultimate and apply it to hers. Divine Judgment has only half the duration of Undying Rage, but in addition to being usable on teammates, it completely nullifies the damage, so you can cast it on a full HP champion and protect them, whereas when Tryndamere's ultimate wears off, death is imminent. A person can use Kill Ult to withstand heavy fire and reposition before going back in, whereas the person with Trin Ult is either fighting until they die, or forced to recall unless they get healed back up. So the applications can vary, but all in all, it's pick your poison. Easily one of the best abilities in the game. Final ability is going to be Yone's Soul Unbound. This is biased, and I'm expecting many to argue why Soulbound over Deathmark in light of them having very similar functions. I didn't want to include Zed twice, even though I'm fully aware Deathmark is better than Soulbound going to point. At the same time, Deathmark has a long cooldown and can only really be used once per fight.
Dieses Replay zu zeigen und die ikonische Voiceline ist ja mehr als illegal. Also wirklich, das macht man aber nicht. Das geht gegen Genfer Konventionen.
However, can be used more frequently, having a cooldown of only 10 seconds at rank 5. Additionally, you get 5 seconds to do whatever you want instead of just 3, and you get ramping speed over the duration, whereas unless you have a secondary dash with Deathmark, it's a lot harder to chase them down. I'll concede that Soul Unbound's usefulness is not as pronounced on champions without a ton of DPS, so tanks and supports would much rather have something else. At the same time, it's just a really good ability, especially on someone with more guaranteed pressure. Many champions in this game have strong engage but no disengage, so once they go in, they're committing to it. Imagine Jax jumping in, stunning you, getting a few autos in, then dashing right back out. Not even just the mobility, Soul Unbound effectively increases your total damage by 35%, which can drastically amplify the pressure of burst-oriented champions. Think of all the times your opponent escaped with 1 HP. That will never happen again. It's frequently regarded to be as strong as an ultimate, but on a basic ability. I know there are plenty of other options I could have picked for this video.
Ja,
Zillion Ultimate, Tarek Ultimate, Camille Q, Fizzy, Garen Ult, Gwen W, Kane.
Aber ich habe am Ende keine Lust darüber zu argumentieren, was anderes noch möglich gewesen wäre zu nehmen, weil so wie es wieder argumentiert wurde und wie es gerechtfertigt wurde, war es fein. Aber halt langweiliges Konzept als bei dem Video. Da hat der Bro, glaube ich, da ein besseres Video davor erschaffen, erstellt.